The thunderous whir of helicopter blades tore through the sky like a blade slicing silk. Dry leaves erupted in a frantic dance across the cracked pavement of quiet Marion, Ohio, and the limbs of old oak trees trembled, as if the wind carried a secret no one was ready to hear. A deep blue helicopter, sleek and glistening under the late afternoon sun, descended into a residential street where time usually moved like molasses. Curtains twitched. Coffee mugs trembled in stunned hands. No one could guess that all this noise, all this spectacle, had one name at its center: Daniel Carter, a reclusive mechanic with oil-stained fingers and a history as dented as the rusted fenders he spent his life fixing. Inside a garage that smelled of gasoline, steel, and memories, Daniel knelt beside a half-gutted engine, oblivious to the chaos unfolding just yards away. He was 42, weathered not by time alone but by quiet disappointments and unmet dreams. The sound of the helicopter didn't faze him at first. It wasn't until the low thump of slowing blades echoed through his ribcage that he rose, wiping his hands on an old rag, and stepped outside. And there she was, stepping out of the aircraft like a ghost from a memory he had tried not to relive. Long blonde hair catching the light, a champagne-colored dress clinging to her like intention, and a carbon-black prosthetic leg with cobalt-blue accents gleaming like it held a secret. Her name was Claire Whitmore. But to Daniel, she was still just her, the woman he'd found half buried in mud and rage on the side of the road one storm-racked night 6 months ago. Her prosthetic had been mangled in a car crash. She refused 911. She refused pity. What she asked for was something raw, something human, and she found that in him. With nothing but salvaged parts from broken drones, an old riding mower, and more sleepless nights than he could count, Daniel built her a new leg. Not a perfect one, but one that worked. One that mattered. She left without warning the next morning, before the sun had burned through the mist. No goodbye. Just a crumpled note on his workbench. "Thank you for giving back what I thought I'd lost, my dignity." Since then, silence. Until now. And now she was back. Not alone, not broken, but with tailored men, steel briefcases, and a gaze that carried gravity. Claire walked up to him, steady and sure, took his hand, and smiled with a warmth that made his knees feel like rusted bolts. "I came to return the favor," she said, her voice smooth as silk over steel. "And to tell you the truth about that night and what it really meant." Daniel didn't speak right away. Her presence was unsettling in the most hauntingly beautiful way. The last time he saw Claire, she was angry at the world, shivering under the weight of survival. Now, she radiated an eerie calm, like someone who had walked through fire and come out not just unburned, but forged. Her prosthetic, his creation, moved fluidly as if it had become an extension of her will, not just her body. But something in her eyes held tension. Not fear. Not sadness. Something deeper. Guilt? Hesitation? "I never told you why I was out there that night," she began, voice steady but hollow, like it had been rehearsed in silence too many times. "I wasn't running from an accident. I was running to something. Or someone. I never made it." Daniel frowned, remembering how adamant she'd been about avoiding the hospital. About keeping things quiet. At the time, he thought it was just pride or trauma. Now he realized she'd been hiding something. Something big. Claire glanced at the two suited men still standing by the helicopter. One of them gave a subtle nod. She turned back to Daniel. "After I left, I didn't just disappear. I was taken somewhere. Not against my will, but let's just say someone saw the prosthetic you made. Someone important." Daniel's heart skipped. He looked down at her leg, remembering the hours spent reshaping bike gears, carving support plates from scrap aluminum, and wiring a feedback loop from an old RC controller. He built it to work, not to impress. "Why would anyone care about this?" he muttered, still not grasping the weight of her words. "Because it works better than most of what the military pays millions for," she answered. And you built it in a garage. From garbage. The moment froze between them like glass, clear, fragile, dangerous. Daniel felt something churn in his gut. Was this why she was back? Did they want to buy the design? Take it? Replicate it? Patent it? I don't care about the money, he said sharply. If that's what this is, Claire cut him off. It's not. Her voice cracked, barely noticeable, but Daniel heard it. I came back because I owe you the truth, and because someone else needs you now. She reached into the inner pocket of her coat and pulled out an old, folded photograph. Her name is June. She's 12. And she's about to go through something I barely survived. Daniel took the photo with reluctant hands. What he saw made the world tilt slightly beneath his feet. A girl, fragile and bright-eyed, sitting in a hospital bed, missing both legs from the knee down. Claire's eyes locked onto his. She needs you, Daniel. Not just your hands, your heart. Daniel stared at the photograph longer than he should have. June's eyes seemed to look right through him, not with fear, but with something far heavier, resignation. It was the expression of someone who had already accepted a future she didn't choose. The hospital bed behind her looked cold and unforgiving, a thin sheet clinging to her small frame like a second skin. Her smile was faint, but it tried, a flicker of defiance in a world that had already taken too much. Daniel's thumb grazed the edge of the photo. It was worn, creased. Claire had been carrying it for a while. He looked up at her. Who is she to you? Claire hesitated. For the first time since stepping out of that helicopter, her confidence fractured. She's my niece, she said quietly. My sister passed 3 years ago. Car accident. Her husband left after the funeral and never came back. June was 8. She's been in and out of surgeries ever since. Last month, they amputated both legs. Her voice cracked again, this time without resistance. And the hospital's options? Heavy, stiff, clinical. They'll give her what the insurance covers. But they won't give her hope. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He walked back into the garage, as if the weight of the conversation needed something solid beneath it. Claire followed. The space hadn't changed since she left. Metal parts on open shelves, soldering irons resting in cracked ceramic cups, old coffee cans filled with screws and bolts like forgotten currency. On one wall, a faded blueprint of the prosthetic he built for her still hung, pinned with rusted nails. Daniel looked at it, then back at Claire. You think I can just do it again? He asked, voice low. For a child. I think you're the only one who can, she replied. Because you didn't just build something functional. You built something that felt like me. You saw the person, not the limb. Her words landed with uncomfortable precision. Daniel wasn't used to being seen, not like that. He sat down heavily on a workstool, hands clasped together, elbows on his knees. I've never worked with kids. I wouldn't even know where to start. What if I make it worse? Claire stepped forward, kneeling so their eyes met. You saved me, Daniel, when I didn't even know I needed saving. She doesn't need a miracle. She needs someone who gives a damn. A silence lingered between them, charged with history and something unspoken. Then came the sound, a soft ringtone from Claire's phone. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. She's fading, Daniel, she whispered. They're moving her into surgery tonight. The silence in the garage was suffocating. Daniel stood still, his gaze locked on the old blueprint as Claire's words echoed in his mind. She's fading, tonight. There was something cruel about the timing, like life was giving him a chance to do the right thing, but only if he moved fast enough. He had never faced a decision like this before. Fixing things was what he did, but people, children, that was different. Machines didn't cry. They didn't feel disappointment when you failed them. Daniel's voice was quiet when he finally spoke. How much time do I have? Claire exhaled, her voice almost breaking. She's stable for now, but after this surgery, there's no going back. If we want her to walk again, really walk, we need to act now. She pulled out a thin manila envelope and slid it onto the workbench. Inside were x-rays, measurements, doctor's notes, everything he would need to understand June's condition. He skimmed through them, but one image stopped him cold, a full-body scan of June's legs, the bones ending abruptly mid-thigh. It was worse than he expected. The usual sockets wouldn't work. He'd have to invent something again, from scratch. But what truly rattled him wasn't the technical challenge, it was the memory that forced its way to the surface. A flash of a hospital room. Another child. Another pair of lifeless legs. His younger brother, Eli. Daniel hadn't spoken that name aloud in years. Eli had been 10 when the drunk driver hit him on his bike. Paralyzed from the waist down. Daniel, only 16, had sworn he'd find a way to help, but he hadn't. The guilt had clung to him for decades, buried deep under engines and regret. June's face had stirred it all back up. Claire watched the shift in his eyes but said nothing. She didn't need to. He got up abruptly, walked to a shelf, and pulled out a crate of unused parts. Metal rods, carbon sheets, flexible polymers he'd salvaged from an old sports car suspension. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over where doubt once Saturday, "I'll need 72 hours. Maybe more," he said, already clearing space on the bench. Claire's eyes shimmered with cautious hope. "She'll be moved to rehab in 5 days. That's all we have." Daniel nodded once. "Then let's not waste a second." Outside, the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows through the garage windows. But inside, under the flickering bulb and scent of machine oil, something new had begun. Not just a prosthetic, a promise. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt again. Then Claire's phone buzzed again. She picked it up, and her expression collapsed. "They're saying she might not make it through the night." Daniel's pulse spiked the moment he heard Claire's words. She might not make it through the night. Every doubt he had tried to suppress now surged through his chest like wildfire. The blueprint in his mind scattered. He wasn't just racing against time anymore. He was racing against fate, and fate had never been kind to men like him. But instead of freezing, his body moved. Instinct, grit, desperation. He yanked open the drawers, gathering tools like a man preparing for war: soldering pen, torque driver, carbon drill. Claire stood near the door, gripping her phone, her knuckles white. They're giving her medication to stabilize the heart rate, but she's not responding well. The anesthesia could be too much. Her voice cracked like thin glass. Daniel didn't stop moving. He reached for the adjustable clamps and set a polymer plate under the heat gun. "Tell them not to operate until I say so," he snapped. Claire blinked. "They won't listen to me. They barely listened when I paid their bills." Daniel looked at her, eyes sharp. "Then give me someone who will." She paused, then handed over the phone, already dialing the number. On the other end, a deep male voice answered, tense, impatient. Claire mouthed, "Dr. Haskins." Daniel took the phone. "This is Daniel Carter. Tell me you haven't cut into her yet." A pause. "We're prepping now," the doctor replied. "Her oxygen levels are dropping, and her heart's erratic. She doesn't have much time." Daniel's voice dropped to something gravelly and dangerous. "If you open her now, you'll ruin what little chance she has to walk again. Give me 6 hours. You owe her that." There was silence, then a reluctant breath. "You have 4. Not a minute more." Daniel hung up and dropped the phone onto the workbench. 4 hours, he muttered. eyes scanning the parts like they were pieces of a divine puzzle. His fingers flew over the materials, trimming, reshaping, welding, as if possessed by every moment he had failed before. Every heartbeat in the room belonged to him now. The prosthetic wasn't just a task. It was a confession, an apology, a plea to a version of himself that never got to save Eli. Claire didn't speak. She just watched him, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched. She had once seen this same intensity when he built her leg, but this was something else. Sharper. More urgent. He wasn't just working. He was fighting. As the hours blurred, the first prototype began to take shape. Sleek, light, shock-absorbing, child-scaled. Then, just as Daniel tested the joint tension, the lights flickered. The power sputtered and died. Darkness swallowed the garage. The blackout hit like a punch to the chest. The faint hum of the heat gun faded, the lights overhead blinked once and vanished, and the garage fell into a thick, suffocating silence. Daniel stood frozen for a second, blinking in the dark, the half-finished prosthetic gripped tightly in his hands. Claire stepped closer, her voice hushed but sharp. "Tell me this doesn't stop you." He didn't answer. He was listening, to the sound of failure creeping in, the ticking clock growing louder inside his head. He moved quickly to the back corner of the garage and yanked open an old storage cabinet. Buried under paint cans and car manuals, he found it, a dusty, gas-powered generator he hadn't used in years. "If this thing still works, I'll call it a miracle," he muttered. Claire helped him drag it out into the driveway. He poured what little fuel he had into the tank and pulled the cord. Nothing. Second pull, still dead. On the third try, it coughed, sputtered, and roared to life, its uneven growl echoing through the quiet street like defiance made mechanical. Inside, the lights flickered on. Weak, unstable, but enough. Daniel wasted no time. He reattached the tools to power and returned to the bench, where the carbon frame of June's prosthetic glistened with sweat and urgency. Every move now had weight. Each adjustment, each weld, wasn't just mechanical, it was deeply personal. The shape of the limb, the angles, the flex points, all guided by the memory of a brother who never got the chance. And the hope of a girl he'd never met. "I think you were always meant to do this," Claire said quietly from the doorway. Her voice didn't seek a response. "You saved me because you didn't see a broken body. You saw someone unfinished." Daniel didn't look at her. "I saw someone who wasn't ready to give up." A pause. "Just like her." He pointed toward the photograph now pinned on the wall beside the blueprint, June's faint smile gazing out into the workshop like a silent deadline. The final piece, the joint stabilizer, snapped into place. Daniel tested the weight balance on the model stand. It held. More than that, it moved with an eerie smoothness, as if eager to be used. He exhaled deeply, shoulders dropping for the first time in hours. "It's ready," he said. But there was no pride in his voice, only exhaustion. Claire stepped closer, staring at the completed leg. "Will it work?" Daniel's eyes darkened. "It has to." Then Claire's phone rang again, one single buzz. She picked it up, and her lips parted as she whispered, "They're prepping her for surgery anyway. They're not waiting." Daniel didn't hesitate. The moment Claire's voice cracked with the news, "They're not waiting," he grabbed the prosthetic, wrapped it in an oil-stained canvas, and headed for the door. "Get in the truck," he said, low and firm. Claire blinked, caught off guard by his sudden forcefulness. "You don't even know where the hospital is." "Then you'll guide me," he snapped. "We've got less than an hour if we're lucky. I'm not letting her wake up without this." His voice trembled on the last word, as if it was pulled from somewhere deeper than rage, somewhere near guilt. The truck was old, an early 2000s Dodge that coughed to life with a growl and shook slightly at idle. Daniel threw the prosthetic into the back seat and hit the gas before Claire had even buckled her seatbelt. The wheels screamed against the pavement, and they were off, headlights cutting through the dark like searchlights. The night stretched long ahead of them, and the road unfurled like a nerve pulled tight. Claire clutched the dashboard, giving him directions between deep breaths. St. Augustine Memorial. 42 minutes on Route 30 if we don't hit lights. They didn't speak much during the drive. The engine's low rumble and the occasional gusts of wind filled the silence. But Daniel's mind was anything but quiet. Every bump in the road rattled more than the truck. It shook memories loose. Of Eli in the hospital bed, asking if he'd ever play baseball again. Of Daniel lying, saying yes. Of holding onto that lie long after the funeral. Maybe June wasn't Eli, but this was his second chance. Not to rewrite the past, but to redeem it. Claire stole glances at him in the dark cabin. She saw the tension in his jaw, the way his knuckles whitened around the steering wheel, how he blinked less, as if afraid he'd miss something. She hadn't expected this from him. Not this fire. He'd always been quiet, introverted, almost invisible. But tonight, he radiated a kind of silent fury, the kind that only comes from having lost something once and refusing to lose it again. The city lights finally broke through the rural darkness, bathing the horizon in a dull orange glow. Claire checked her phone. 25 minutes. They'll be wheeling her in soon. I've called 3 times. No one's answering. Her voice cracked. We might be too late. Daniel tightened his grip on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead like a man chasing salvation. Then we make them wait. And just then, flashing red lights filled the mirror, not from the hospital. From a police car pulling up fast behind them. The red and blue lights stung Daniel's rearview mirror like a warning from fate itself. The siren screamed behind them, slicing through the tension already choking the cab. Claire turned, her breath catching. Don't stop, she said, almost without thinking. Daniel's grip tightened around the wheel. He knew what was at stake. But he also knew what it meant to keep driving. In a town like Marion, running from the police wasn't just reckless, it was suicide, legally and socially. If we don't, she goes under without that leg, Claire added, her voice sharp now. They'll cut her open, and that'll be it. Daniel's jaw tensed. He turned onto a side road without signaling, tires skidding on the loose gravel. The cop car followed immediately. They won't just let us explain when we get there, he muttered. They'll cuff me before I step out of the truck. Claire opened the glove box, rifling through old insurance papers and tools until she found what she was looking for, a laminated card with a seal, government issued. She shoved it in front of his face. This is from the Department of Veterans Affairs. I pulled every string I had to get it. Show them this if we stop. Tell them you're delivering military-grade medical equipment. It's not a lie. The truck bounced violently as they hit a pothole. The prosthetic in the back shifted slightly, wrapped tight but vulnerable. Daniel glanced in the rear view again. The cruiser was gaining. We're 10 minutes out, Claire said, reading the GPS. If we lose them now, we'll make it. Daniel took a sharp left, cutting across an empty gas station lot, nearly clipping a trash bin. The cop car hesitated at the turn, giving them precious seconds. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They surged ahead. Inside the truck, the silence returned, not calm, but the kind that comes before impact. Daniel's heart pounded in his throat. The only thing louder than the engine was the thought, what if I'm too late again? Not this time. He couldn't let another child disappear into that void where second chances didn't exist. Claire must have sensed it. She reached over, placing her hand on his, steady, grounding. This isn't just about her anymore, is it? She asked. He didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed locked on the road, knuckles white, breath shallow. Finally, he spoke, voice raw. No. It's about what I couldn't do back then. And what I will do now. Just then, the hospital appeared over the next rise, its lights piercing the early morning fog like a lighthouse. But between them and the emergency entrance were 2 squad cars waiting. The hospital stood just ahead, glowing under sterile floodlights like a promise Daniel could almost touch, but between them and the entrance were 2 police cruisers, blocking the drive like guards at the gates of judgment. One officer stood outside, hand resting on his holstered weapon, eyes locked on Daniel's truck as it rolled to a stop. The tires crunched to a halt on the asphalt. Sirens had gone quiet, but the tension was louder than ever. Claire leaned forward, hand trembling slightly, her eyes flicking between the prosthetic in the back seat and the officer's unreadable expression. The door of the cruiser opened, and another officer stepped out, younger, stockier, but with a face that didn't look angry, just tired. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered, firm but calm. Daniel stepped out slowly, both hands raised. "In the back seat," he said quickly, voice tight. "There's a medical prosthetic. It's for a child. Her name is June Whitmore. She's inside this hospital, about to go into surgery without it." The officer hesitated, his gaze shifting toward the truck's rear window. "Sir, you ran from law enforcement. That's a felony." Claire exited the truck next, moving fast. "I have clearance from the VA," she said, holding up the laminated card. "We're not criminals. We're trying to stop a tragedy." The officer took the card, studied it for a moment, then exchanged a glance with his partner. "We'll need to confirm this. There's no time." Daniel barked. "If she goes under now, that's it. She wakes up to a life she didn't choose. Again. I can't let that happen." There was a pause, long, awful, electric. The officer looked at Claire, then at Daniel, then at the card again. Then he stepped aside. "Go. But someone's coming with you," he added. "If this is a lie." Daniel didn't wait to hear the rest. He sprinted to the back seat, grabbed the canvas-wrapped prosthetic, and followed Claire into the ER entrance as the officer radioed something behind them. Inside, the hospital buzzed with clinical urgency. A nurse met them at the door, wide-eyed. "You can't be in here," Claire cut her off. "Where's June Whitmore? Tell Dr. Haskins this is her aunt. And this," she pointed to Daniel, breathless, "is the only person who can change what happens next." Within seconds, they were rushing down sterile halls, escorted by a nurse with a clipboard and a confused intern trailing behind. As they reached the prep area, a doctor stepped out, pulling off his gloves. "It's done," he said flatly. "She's under." The procedures started. Daniel's heart stopped. Claire froze. And then the doctor added, almost reluctantly, "But I haven't made the first incision yet." Daniel didn't wait for permission. The moment the doctor finished speaking, "I haven't made the first incision yet," he was already unwrapping the canvas, revealing the sleek, midnight black prosthetic gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The room fell into stunned silence. Even the surgical team stared, transfixed, unsure if what they were seeing was medical equipment or art. The doctor, Dr. Haskins, stepped forward, brow furrowed. "You built this by hand?" Daniel nodded once, eyes fixed on the operating table beyond the glass, where June lay under anesthesia, so small, so fragile. "She doesn't need to lose more than she already has," Daniel said. "With this, we can bypass the invasive socket system. We anchor above the residual limb with adaptive flex joints. It moves with her, not against her." Haskins took the piece in his hands, surprisingly light, shock-absorbing, and completely unlike the bulky, impersonal limbs he was used to. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured. "Because no one builds like this," Claire added softly, standing behind Daniel. "They manufacture." He listens. In the prep room, nurses worked quickly to re-sterilize the environment while the surgeon called in his team for a rapid plan adjustment. Claire stayed outside, holding her breath as if the slightest exhale might shake the outcome. Daniel sat silently on a metal bench, hands trembling not from fear, but from everything that had led to this moment. He thought of Eli, his brother's laughter, his silence, his absence. That unfixable loss. But now, this wasn't just redemption. It was release. Time passed slowly, the kind of time that stretches and folds in on itself when the world hangs in the balance. Finally, the ore doors opened. Dr. Haskins stepped out, mask pulled down, fatigue painted across his face. "She's stable," he said. "And the integration looks promising. Once she wakes up, we'll begin post-op assessments. If her nerves respond like we expect, she'll walk, maybe even run." Claire covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming. Daniel didn't move. He only nodded, once, firmly, as if acknowledging something larger than relief. Something like peace. For the first time in decades, the weight in his chest began to lift. Later that week, Daniel returned to his garage. The photo of June remained pinned to the wall, beside the original blueprint. But now, a new sketch hung beside them, smaller, lighter, more refined. A beginning. Claire called him that morning. Her voice was bright. She took her first step. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at his hands, still rough, still stained, and smiled. "Good," he whispered. "Let's build the second one."